Good evening, and it's a real uh, good time for us to come together, as Amit was just sharing with us. This is the centenary year since Pandita Ramabai passed away, and it's a year where a lot of activities are happening around her life and work. And it's also a great time for us at Tracy to remember her life, her work, and her contribution, which also is an inspiration for all that we do here in Tracy. For those of us who are new to the Tracy Reflection, we meet together once in a month. We take topics that are relevant to the society in India, to the context or the contemporary situations in India. And we call in people from different diverse walks of life, Christians, who would bring their reflections on those topics. But then this is not a place where we just hear on the topic and leave, but we also see that there is adequate time for each of us to also interact with whoever is leading us on the particular session. I'm Satish Simon, the director for Tracy, and it's my joy to welcome you all. For those of you who are new to Tracy, Tracy is Theological Research and Communication Institute. We got established in the year 1972 and registered as a society in 1975. Our primary objective has been to conduct research and to communicate theological perspectives on contemporary issues for the flourishing of the church and the society. As regards our members, our society members come from diverse backgrounds, interests, and expertise, and Tracy provides a platform for them to review, reaffirm, and redefine Christian praxis for our times. And therefore, the way we go about our activities of transformation for the society is our works are disseminated through reflective writings by means of occasional papers, journal articles and books, and by organizing lectures, seminars, workshops, and consultations. For this last 1 year, we have also taken up the whole calling of training people on bringing them to very strong biblical foundations, be it on integral mission, be it on calling for political engagement, and the present ongoing training on gender and biblical equality. So once again, thank you for joining. We look forward to our time with Anna, Jacob, and Keith, even as they have a conversation around the book that Keith has researched for the last 25 years. And it's a very seminal work, a book of 800 pages, a very comprehensive volume. And we are thankful to you, Keith, for taking this interest. While Anna would welcome Keith and introduce Keith for us, it's my pleasure to introduce Anna Jacob for us. Anna Jacob is a research scholar in the field of history at Delhi University. Her work is on the 19th century Protestant missionary encounter with various sections of the population and government, especially in the princely town state of Travancore, which is now part of Kerala. Anna is also a board member of Tracy, and therefore, Anna, we warmly welcome you even as you take up this conversation forward. Let me also say that Anna is married to Febin Matthew, advocate practicing in Delhi, and they are blessed with daughter Nanma. So over to you, Anna Jacob, for the next 40 minutes, when you introduce to us Keith, and then get into the conversation around the book. And later on, we will have all of us joining the conversation. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So to introduce Dr. Keith White, he has researched Pandita Ramabai's life and work for over 25 years. The book that we are discussing tonight, Let the Earth Hear Her Voice, is a result of his labor of love. He's a graduate of Oxford, Edinburgh, and Cardiff universities. He has lectured and written books on diverse topics, including child theology. He has extensive experience of working with, along with children who have experienced loss at a community called Millgrove in the UK. He's also a publisher of an edition of the Bible for ordinary people worldwide. Dr. White, it's good to be able to talk to you once again. So may I begin with asking you, how did you encounter Pandita Ramabai, and what motivated you to keep working on researching on her life for such a long time?
If I may, Anna, just before answering that question, say that if we were meeting face to face, then I would go around seeking to say namaste or give a handshake to each person. So I would just want to say that I find myself in a strange situation of seeing faces around. And among the things I'd like to say are that one of my special companions, Tony Cantali, is with us, Italian name, and he's the one who designed not only the Bible, but also the Bible for Ordinary People, but the Ramabai book. I'm thrilled, Amit doesn't know this at the moment, but Amit, I've been following with great interest what Atta Lagumka and George Cora have been telling me about the walk from Kedgaon to Delhi. I would love to have been with you, but one of the great joys is to hear that you are telling the story of Ramabai. It's always seemed over the 25 years when I've been on trains and buses in India, I've always felt it rather strange that someone from London, UK, was the one people were asking, tell us the story of Ramabai, when what I was wanting to do was ask them to tell me the story. And also to say that it's wonderful, I can see Rama there as well. Rama, obviously in KL at the moment, but with very rich connections with India, New Delhi, and also, as you say, Maharashtra. We'll try to get, I've asked George Cora if he can find a way of getting the Ramabai book to you, all right, just so you know. Anyway, so Anna, I'm afraid that's the way I am. I like to know who I'm with, and would that I could listen to each person's story. Your question was how I discovered Ramabai and also why I've spent 25 years of my life. By the way, that's also 25 years of my marriage. And so my wife, Ruth, is an important partner in this because she's allowed me to spend so much time with people who are enchanted by Ramabai, mesmerized by Ramabai. And my wife finds me talking about this woman, Ramabai, again and again. There is one other preliminary thing. I just want to connect the past and the present by showing you today's paper. And so the headline in the Times is Sunak. I'm sure you know this is our Prime Minister, our current Prime Minister. I can't say how long he'll be Prime Minister, of course, that's not something given to me. But he is denying King Charles III his wish to attend a conference in Egypt, a COP conference. So the person who is now in Downing Street has been denied. Who would have thought when this letter was written from Downing Street in 1884 on behalf of Gladstone, the Prime Minister, making a gift to Ramabai as Prime Minister, but also saying that when I'm not Prime Minister, I will still support Ramabai privately. In other words, this is not just in role. So I wanted to make that link between 1884 and 2022. Who would have thought, least of all Ramabai, that we would have someone celebrating Diwali in 10 Downing Street in England? So there we have it. Anna, a slightly unruly response to your question. I discovered Ramabai, humanly speaking, by chance in Mumbai on the 22nd of October, 1997. If you want to, explore any more about that, you can, but that's how it is. And I've got my diary of that day and the entry of the discovery. Why have I continued for 25 years? I guess as a human being who's insatiably interested in everything, that's me, that if you come across someone like Ramabai a diamond of priceless value, and then you're encouraged by others to study her, then what a privilege. I mean, it's not something that is an effort. So the first thing I did after discovering her was to write a PhD, which was also designed by Tony Cantali, by the way, just so you know. So he's the one here behind the scenes. So that was finished in 2003. And then before long, I was writing lots and lots of articles, like this one in Christian History, 2005, on Ramabai. But all the time, the task was to write a major biography, which also would provide the basis for a film. But the important thing was that it would be something substantive that people could come to and draw from whatever they were looking for.
Right. In our last conversation, you had mentioned that more than a biography to you, this was one way of writing history, of looking at this singular life of Ramabai and, trying to understand her times. And I can sort of see why you said that, because her life tends to disturb these neat binaries and categories that we have in Indian history between, say, colonial and Indian, or between religions, Hinduism and Christianity. Could you talk a little bit about that, about this method of writing that you have?
Yeah, I think I've always been interested in the history of history. I mean, that is the philosophy of history. What is history? How do we write it? And we know that history is usually written by the victors, by those who have decided. So Chinese history is being rewritten at this moment by the premier and his loyal friends. The history of Hong Kong is being rewritten at this moment, and so on. So there are different ways of doing history. As we know, we can fix on a period, we can fix on a geographical place and then trace it through time. But in what I've done with Ramabai's life is I've sought to tell her story. The term I use with my students, Anna, is by walking 360 degrees around. Now that's, this is something I offer always to students. Try when you're writing, assessing, reflecting on something, try to see if you can walk 360 degrees around the person. So if you're looking at a person or an issue, how does it look from a male point of view? How does it look from a female point of view? How does it look from the rich and the poor? How east and west? How does it look from the past, the present, the future? Always trying to walk round. And so in writing this one biography, I've been asked, do I write biographies? The answer is no, I've written one, and that's it. In doing this, I've been very conscious that I'm trying to, as it were, follow Ramabai right through her life, if you like. It's a borehole through history. But uniquely, she was a person who not only literally traveled the world, I mean, that is something that you need to realize, right round, she circumnavigated the globe, but she was insatiably interested in history worldwide. I mean, she just drank it in. She was someone who absorbed, what can I say, information in an extraordinary way. And so in a very practical way, by following her, I found that my horizon has been widened, I mean, all the time. So that's, I think that's what you're trying to ask about. So it's not, let's forget the grand sweep of history. Let's forget the Raj, let's forget the big things that are happening, European ideas, the Indian Renaissance. I'm using the term used in Bengal, of course. That isn't the opposite of forgetting these things. It's finding that Ramabai is engaging with them all. She's conscious of what's going on, but never losing touch with the ground level.
Right. Turning to Ramabai's life, she was, as you show throughout her book, she was a person who had a mind that was independent. She was deeply caring about the individuals who were under her care. And she was also very curious and read widely. And these were some of the traits of her personality. And could you take us to some of the early influences in her life, in her childhood, that sort of contributed to making her the person that she became?
I could, Anna, but I would encourage people to read the book. I mean, so as I always say, as a lecturer, I'm aware that students basically don't read, so they're looking for you to summarize as a lecturer, summarize things. And also I'm conscious that, let's say, Amit here has been telling the story of Ramabai, do you see what I mean? So what I don't want to do is repeat what everyone knows. So let me go for some of the significant things from my point of view. It's significant she was acquainted with grief and with poverty. I'm stopping there because that changes a person's life for good. She never lost the scars, and so the picture of John, of how things will be in Revelation chapter 5, of a wounded lamb, I think that's worth having in mind. The scars remain. She had, by any standards, a quite exceptional father, and so it's really important, and a mother, as it happens. I mean, mother and father. But he was someone who was willing to stand out, get up for what he believed, to search for the truth, and uninfluenced by the number who were against him. So if people said, well, the majority are in favor of this, he would note that, but then that wouldn't sway him. He would still seek the truth. Now, I mean, we see, if we trace this through Ramabai's life, you see that that's exactly her. Sometimes she had the whole of the hegemony of Brahmin Pune against her, but this didn't actually sway her. Another thing is that she traveled on foot largely around India for all her childhood and teenage years. And this, of all things, to wander around the subcontinent of India with her mind, her capacious mind, was a way of her learning, absorbing to a degree that I think is astonishing. So I think it's hard for us to take in. I believe it's very significant she never spent a day at school, because for some people, school interrupts their learning process. So to be told, go into a classroom, sit still, and then what is on the blackboard is what you must concentrate on, is not the best way of learning. I mean, I think we'd all agree on that. And so Ramabai learned in a different way. And there were times when she observed, when she was picking up a shell, for example, on the beach, she observed the rest of her family didn't seem interested in the shell, but she was. And I couldn't discover anything from working in her archives. That's the archives of her books. That's her collection of books, Mano's books, also original papers, the Bible, the lexicon, and so on. I found it hard to find anything that she wasn't interested in, if you see what I mean. Her library seemed to be limitless or boundless, as befits someone who never divided things into subjects. So if geography is divided into one subject and then history into another, you've already got a problem when history and geography can't be separated because they influence one another. If you're the Russian president, for example, you must have a warm water port. Geography demands that you do. And so the battle in Ukraine is not a complete accident, geographically speaking. It's part of a long, long story. And so Ramabai, when she was looking up at the stars, wanted to know about the constellations. When she was looking at little insects, she was wanting to learn about them and how the stars and the insects were connected. And she didn't have a teacher or a curriculum to come between her and say, don't be silly, stay focused on this. One of the things that happens if you wander around India, as she did, is you learn languages. I think you learn cultures as well, but culture and language going together. And so she never bragged. She was never counting what she'd achieved in any way. But it's difficult to know how many languages she learned. But over time, it seemed as though it took her something like 2 weeks to learn the basics of how a language worked. So 2 weeks in Gujarat, you see what I mean, 2 weeks in Bengal. And the language she struggled with most was Tamil, by the way, just so you know. But so she, English wasn't a problem, nor Hebrew and Greek, but Tamil seemed to be stubbornly resistant to her, whatever. So there's some of the features, I think. One of the things that I think Nicol McNicol, a biographer who I think was in tune with her in a remarkable way, one of the things he said was that she never had to unlearn the discipline of her strict Bhakti Hindu upbringing. And I think that's important. What he's trying to say is that stood her in really good stead, which was the Bhakti walk, the Bhakti Marga, and with a father who was undeviatingly committed to truth. Nothing would stand between him and the truth till his dying day. I don't know whether that, and I come back on that, but there's some of the things that have struck me about her early life that mark her out. I think you see, with all that in mind, when she arrives in Bengal, she's not going to be just a normal pupil arriving for further education. She is someone who, you know, might be called Pandita or even Sarasvati, because her learning seems to be so extensive and deep.
And coming to, you mentioned her arrival at Calcutta, and you know, that was significant in her life because until then she was exposed to the Hindu scriptures, of course, and she was very learned in them. But this opened her to a much more wider world. She met many people, many of the leading thinkers and reformers of the day. And she read widely about the issues of the day. And but she had a complicated relationship with the world of reformism. I mean, they celebrated her. Here was the arrival of, you know, this learned lady, learned in the Sanskrit scriptures. And but I think right from the beginning, she saw some of the limits of reformism, and which you've mentioned. And which soon led her to be sort of dissatisfied with what reform was offering women. Could you talk about some of her ideas of on the position of women and about reform at this point in her life?
Yes, I can. I think just a phrase that I don't want to go any further without giving so much thanks to one of those who gone before me, Professor Meera Kosambi. I think another phrase that Meera Kosambi created some wonderful phrases about Ramabai. One was this: an insider's empathy and an outsider's critique. Insider's empathy and outsider's critique. Now, I'm responding to your question about Kolkata, if you see what I mean. Whoever she met, if you met her, I met her, if people from a denomination met her, Anglicans, Baptists, doesn't matter who they were, reformers, Hindus, whoever they were, she would have an insider's empathy, but an outsider's critique. So she never suspended her critical faculties at any point, which meant in some ways she was an uncomfortable companion for anyone. And my testimony is, having walked with her for 25 years, I don't know how to put it, because the best adjective isn't uncomfortable, but it's challenging, because I find as I continue in conversation with her, she's challenging me. It's not as though, all right, we agree, we're part of the same cozy club. It's not like that. So it's a little bit difficult because your term reform and reformers is sort of pretty elastic. And we've got, yeah, there are different strands at this stage. But if we stay with, at the moment, the Brahmo Samaj, could we? And we may come to, you might want to come back to reformers like Ranade and so on.
Yes.
Later, if you do, but see how we go about this. Yes, it was an eye-opener. Well, I mean, for someone wandering around India, acquainted with grief, having seen her father, mother, sister, and so on die in poverty, to find herself in this place where things were swirling around and where she was fated because of her extensive knowledge, not least Sanskrit, which shouldn't be, I mean, gainsaid or underestimated. No woman, it was said, should have learned Sanskrit, let alone be able to compose an ode on the spot for 3 distinguished professors. So the encounter with, obviously she came after Ramamohan Roy, but Keshav Chandra Sen was around. And this was just what can I say? It was like a wonderful opening of her mind and so on to all sorts of things, including this interface between East and West and between Hinduism and Western philosophy and also Christianity. I mean, so I'm wanting to bring in Western philosophy because sometimes that can be overlooked. But when you're reading the text, there is this assumption that the West is superior. That's sort of, it's not, sometimes not said, but India and Hinduism are backward and the West is superior. That's, you know, that's just a one of the tropes. That's one of the discourses that goes on. So she finds herself in this tumult of learning, beautiful situation for her, like a bazaar of ideas where you have ideas of every spice and color. And yeah, a challenge for her was always how does the teaching of someone match up with their lives? And what consistency is there between action and word? And so that's the insider's empathy. I empathize with your words, but now I've got the outsider's critique. How do they match your actions? And eventually she found that though the Brahmo Samaj, I'm not talking about other reformers at the moment, but though the Brahmo Samaj just opened things up for her and just was an important part of her learning and raising of consciousness and awareness, she, over time, she came to find that someone steeped in Bhakti Marga struggled with the way ideas were tending to become separated from actions. I don't want to, she wasn't critical, but there are particular examples. You may want to come back on other reformers and so on, because I haven't talked about gender. If you'd like to ask about that, please do.
Yes. So coming to what was the focus of her life's work and much of her writing, which is in her time the condition of child widows, as well as the general condition of women in the country at that time. And she had begun to think about this very early on. In one of her early letters, you mentioned that she writes about this image of a caged bird when talking about the condition of women. And this is an image that continues to resonate even in present day writings of, you know, feminist women's rights activists. As recently as, 2019, in her book, Fearless Freedom, Kavita Krishnan uses this particular image to talk about how it's still personal freedoms, the freedom of mobility, all these are, very still debated. So in spite of having come a long way, women, with women excelling in every field. Sort of social relations have been slow to catch up with that, with the advances that women have been making. So there is this constant friction. Um, could we talk about that a little bit, about, Ramabai's advocacy of, equal, it was unheard of to talk about women being equal in the 19th century. She went in a way much beyond the 19th century reformers, what they were advocating at that time. They were reforming what they were saying was about, improving the position of women within the structure of patriarchy. But Ramabai went much beyond that. And very early on, she had started talking about, anticipating ideas such as agency, and, the agency of women was very important to her, like their ability to choose. We see that later also when she sets up the Sadans and Mukti. So could you talk about this?
Well, I could, but there isn't time enough actually to to talk about it as richly as we should. I think the things that are important to have in mind are that she took action after Calcutta. If we follow it through, her husband dies. Manu, her little child, is now with her. They come to Pune. And one of the things she does is to take her little girl, Thakubai, into her home. And I believe that's a seminal moment. That illustrates what you're saying, rather than ideas of what might happen, advocating and that sort of thing. Alongside her campaigning, setting up things like the Ariya Mahila Samaj and so on, alongside the campaigning, there is this commitment always to individuals. So Thakubai recurs to her dying day. This is typical of Ramabai. So she is living out what she believes, which is that in essence, Ramabai believes that Thakubai is of infinite value. That is, she is a girl. Some would see her as having a disability with her eyes and so on, but there we are. I think it's maybe the helpful thing to say is that Ramabai does, by the very nature of the way her life developed, the way she thought, she transcends categories. So she also transcends time. One of the things Mira Kasambi said to me when I said, is she still relevant today? And this was when Mira was staying in this very house where I am at the moment. She said, she's still way ahead of us. She's still way ahead of the curve. And that's important to bear in mind. And how can you be way ahead of the curve? Well, one of the things is that she was able to anticipate thinking, philosophy, categories. So I found as a philosopher and sociologist that though she didn't use the terms that have now been derived by others, I can find embryonic use of those terms. I think I argue in the book that slavery was her overall framework through which she processed all warped human relationships. So somewhere along the line, any human relationship, whether it's Brahmin and Dalit or whatever it may be, insider and outsider, results from and results in some form of slavery. So the caged bird is, I chose that obviously she chose it, but I selected that as an important image. I think one of the things that's overlooked, I think probably people know something, those listening into the conversation, Anna, know something of her life. I'd like to focus on some of those things we don't know really. And I think Mukti we do know. I hope several people have been there. I know, George Corr and others have been. But the Sharda Sadan, that is, first of all in Mumbai, then in Pune, they have been overlooked because they were relatively short time spans. It was a decade that they existed. but properly examined, and I spend quite a bit of the book doing that, they represent a radical program, which is beyond, you talked about gender equality. The trouble with binaries like that is you say, presumably you've got male, I don't know, who knows, and then you bring female up to that. Well, Ramabai wasn't into that. She was into life to the full and transcending simply, let's bring those up to here. But it was, how do we go about creating an environment where people can reach their potential? By people, I mean people. And she realized that unless girls and women in India had encouragement to have open minds and to see themselves as agents, then the sons were going to suffer because they were going to have mothers who didn't understand agency. And so she was never stuck in one category or corner. But in the Sharda Sadans, as I describe them, it seems to me that we have something of her vision for India. This is now in the minute particular. So how can India be? India is a garden where people can walk freely, where they can look at the stars. I mean, you know, I remember being in India when there was the first flag put on the moon, and the excitement, even in cricket was turned off for a moment. I mean, just for about 10 seconds, but even cricket was off the televisions. So she was looking at the stars. But the idea that this was girls and women, child widows, who were enjoying a freedom unparalleled in their lives and unparalleled in India. This was the thing. So there was nothing that was not open to them. So Ramabai had created an environment where they were safe. That's a critical thing. Those who advocate equal education don't realize that unless you provide a safe environment, that is meaningless to, say, child widows or whatever, because it has to be safe. And then a curriculum which is extensive. Now, this is where Froebel needs to be mentioned, because I'm afraid in the book, people have said, look, you know, there are different groups that don't come out of this very well. And I think in Ramabai's company, there is a sense in which her outsider's critique means that none of us come out of it very well. And she's not wanting to come out of it very well either. So in other words, she is very critical of herself. She's very realistic about that. But I don't think it's possible to understand Ramabai's life and work, and certainly not Mukti, unless you understand Friedrich Froebel. Now, lots have been written about Ramabai with no reference to Froebel, but he was one whose vision of, I call it the learning process. I don't want to use education or schools or anything like that. I want to deconstruct all that. The learning process that starts with a little child and her mother on the ground, playing with insects or shrubs or whatever it may be, perhaps a stream in a village, or the bazaar and the spices or whatever it may be. That's where learning begins, under the trees, at dawn, wherever it may be. Froebel was wanting to take that as the basis of his philosophy of education. It chimes with Ramabai's experience of wandering around India as a free agent, of course. But something Froebel saw was that each child was potentially someone who could shape the destiny of nations. And that's the bit about Froebel that was so radical. Every child was not only a nation builder, but a nation changer, potentially. This was male or female, rich or poor, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, whatever it was. And that's the bit that can be easily missed. But it chimes so much with Ramabai. I mean, so why nothing stopped her in reaching her potential, and nothing should come in the way of anyone. So I don't know whether that helps to understand things, but it seems that the Sharda Sadans are where one needs to focus attention in order to understand her vision for India.
Yes, thank you for bringing up the Sharda Sadans, because I was just coming to that, because that is sort of the most important work that Ramabai started, and I don't know if, and if any institution or any model like that exists even today in India, because of, the kind of wide curriculum that, and this unique philosophy of education, which you already started to talk about. And to her, it was, you mentioned that to her, this was a radical and living model of, how the transformation of girls and women was to be achieved. And I was really interested in, the way that you mentioned that she kept kept the Sharda Sadans as a place of freedom, of free cultural interaction, of free social intercourse between the girls, and where their dignity as persons and their freedom to choose how they want their life to be carried out, to go ahead, the freedom to make something of themselves, that was taken very seriously by Ramabai. And this was also, there was also this policy of neutrality that she followed, where she exposed the girls to both Hinduism and Christianity. And, you mentioned how both scriptures from both the religions were available to the girls. And this was something very different, both at the time that it was, both in the 19th century and even today. Whether, is this even possible to, taking the freedom of young girls and even children so serious that they can, make decisions about their lives by themselves.
Yeah, I mean, just as you know, Mukti is freedom, spells freedom. Azadi, title of the collection of Arundhati Roy's writings, in which Azadi, meaning freedom, in which she says, where is the big film of Ramabai? That's one of the reasons for my book. I'm trying to give film producers and directors something of a screenplay. So I'm just wanting to say that's part of the long-term program. But if you take slavery as your analysis of the overall analysis of warped as in destructive and restrictive human relations, then it follows that freedom is going to be in some way what you're looking for. Just to say that we've Ramabai is going around the globe, went from Pune, where she was very restricted. She found herself unfree, like a caged bird in Pune, and with Manu. She then went to the headquarters of the Raj in England, and she didn't experience freedom there. She did in the US, and that's why her longest book, apart from the Bible, is an analysis, a major analysis in Marathi of the USA. That is a people that threw off the colonial yoke of the British. So she sees it as the land of the free. But all the time, she hasn't lost her critical edge. So she's studied, among other things, how in Europe, women, as called witches, were treated. And in the USA, she has studied in detail not only slavery, but how the indigenous peoples, sometimes called, quotes, Red Indians, end of quote. Think about that, Ramabai coming across Red Indians. She studied in detail how this land of the free had treated the indigenous peoples. So what she's discovered is that as she comes back to India, it's not as though she's been in a place where Europe and the US are self-evidently righteous and right, where everything is, everyone is free. She's well aware that's not so. And so she comes back to India. The Sharda Sadans represent a radical working model of how things can be. And that's an important thing, because there is the question about how you have change in history. The Chinese Communist Party at the moment is taking one view of change in history. Another view is the view of people like Jesus, who would gather together a small group and set up a community, a working model, a radical working model, where they eat together, they walk together, they learn together, and so on, they cry together. And that's what Ramabai was seeking to do. There was something, I wasn't quite sure of the precise question you had in mind, Anna, that provoked my response. I just wanted to make sure I circumnavigated the globe with her, if you see what I mean, and got back to the Sharda Sadans.
Yes. And it wasn't long before this kind of a unique experiment, this project, it invited a furor. I mean, it invited very harsh opposition from the reformers of the time, the more orthodox Hindu reformers of the time, and politicians, the more extremist politicians like Tilak. And you mentioned that, one of the reasons for this, of course, the fear of, conversions of the girls coming under the influence of Ramabai and converting, of course, was seemingly the cause that stood in the forefront. But there was also, you mentioned that much more important was Ramabai's questioning of both through her writings and advocacy, as well as through a living model like the Sharda Sadans, the questioning of the sort of patriarchal structure of the society at that time. That was what sort of infuriated the Orthodox Hindus of the time. The idea that, these girls who are, widows, who are supposed to be, behind closed doors, are actually being given this, that they can even imagine this life of freedom.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I mean, the question comes, what was it that so infuriated Bal Tilak, to take one? By the way, using the word reformers for both Ranade, that's the Chief Justice, and also Tilak, means we put under one umbrella what you then called extreme reformers, and I'd like to avoid the word extreme. So Bal Tilak has an agenda which is clearly set out, and so this goes with, in some ways, the strand of the Peshwas in Pune, and preserving, as it were, what can I say, the integrity of what was seen to be a Hindu way of life. Ranade and others saw that there had to be reform, change of that. You couldn't simply carry on, in their view, with that traditional way of life. So having said that, Ramabai finds herself attacked. By the way, it gets very close to physical attack as well, if you look at the records, but she's certainly attacked by words and so on. The question comes, what so infuriated Bal Tilak? There were others, Christians, who were also infuriated. You might want to follow that one through. But if you put the Hindu scriptures and the Bible side by side, you're going to get criticism from both sides. So one is going to call it proselytization, the other is syncretism. So put them together and there's no safe ground now. And I wonder how today it would be if in churches the Hindu scriptures were placed side by side with the Bible, or vice versa. Do you see what I mean? Where is that possible? So Ramabai, I'm convinced that Mira Kusambi is as close to this as possible, which was that Christianity and proselytization was a smokescreen for the real threat that Ramabai posed as a charismatic female who should have been quiet. As a child widow, she should never have been seen or heard of again. So as a widow, she should never have been heard of or seen again. She was a charismatic, obviously gifted orator and writer. This got underneath the skin of some males. And she was critiquing the whole structure of societies, if I can say so, British, American, and Indian. This is why it's not comfortable for anyone. And so, yeah, there we are. So it's not just about Christianity and Hinduism. That's part of the mix. Is that making sense? So it's a radical critique of what eventually is another form of slavery. For those of you who are interested, the theorist who I found most helpful is Michel Foucault, and his analysis of different things, mental institutions, of punishment, prisons, and so on, and how that you get reform, but you end up with some things not actually changing. You might close mental hospitals, but you find that the power relations have just simply taken another manifestation, another form. Anna.
Yes. Of course, from there, she goes on to found Mukti. And here, Mukti has been read in, has various labels have been used over the years to describe it. But you yourself chose to read it as a kind of living text of the way in which, Ramabai chose to provide an expression of, the ways in which Jesus would love and serve people. And, you describe the kind of resourcefulness and the hard work with which she founds Mukti, and how it combined, home and school and worship, as well as education for the thousands of girls and even boys who studied there. Could you talk a little bit about, her vision of Mukti and its relevance? Of course, it continues till today, and its relevance for India today.
Yes, I'd love to. I mean, I think you know, Anna, and others do, that I sit lightly on titles or status, but the one I treasure is brother of Mukti. Right, so that's as far as I know, I'm the only brother of Mukti. There may be others, but I haven't met them. And so one of the great delights of my life is that the children of Mukti know that basically I'm there as one of them. And as far as they're concerned, I play. So I play cricket with them, I play with them. When I take services, we always involve them, and there is role play and so on. So Mukti is special to me, not just as a concept, but as a place where I feel I belong. As one who grew up in the place where I'm sitting now, which was started by my grandfather in 1899, which is like Mukti. So when Anil and Ray and Francis were with us for the last 2 months, they felt completely at home here, Mukti and Mill Grove, so much so. I'm pleased you mentioned Jesus in what you said about Mukti, because in the process that we've traveled in Ramabai's life, from a very early age, when she first heard the name Jesus in Pandrapur, near the river Bhima, through the reading of the Gospel of Luke in Bengali, given her by the Baptist minister, Reverend Isaac Allen, through her reading of the Bible, thanks to the Brahmo Samaj and so on. Jesus is one who by this stage, this is coming to Mukti, has become the one she called her guru, a lifelong guru, not someone she was traveling with for a period of time before parting. And so I think that's important, because it's very hard, in my view, to understand Mukti without Jesus, and the way so things come together. Yeah, so Mukti is a working model, but always a work in progress. And I think that it's, so there is some continuity of the Sharda Sadhans, but the weight of hundreds and hundreds of starving and sick child widows and girls and women coming onto this piece of land, Kedgan, meant that whereas the Sadhans had started small and were very carefully constructed, Mukti was the opposite. It was overrun like a refugee camp with people pouring from a war zone or famine, as a famine in this case. And so it's a testimony to her extraordinary resilience that it survived. I mean, it survived anyway, but still survives. And I took the trouble in the chapter on Mukti to look at the, I don't know, a dozen to 15 different descriptions of Mukti, to say, look, now hold it a minute, what is it? In essence, I believe it's something like a kindergarten. That's a children's garden. And for children, read a people's garden. That's of all ages. Whereas you say everything is bound up. That's worship and play and work and so on, which is what's very attractive to it. The two things that I think are worth saying about Mukti, so we don't separate them out. One is what's called the revival, because very early on, 1905 to 1907, there's obviously a chapter in the book on revival. There is this remarkable series of experiences and events that help, in my view, help to understand how Mukti developed. And so this is the coming together of a most remarkable and unique set of factors, that including her walk with Jesus, her discovery of Jesus as the one she will now follow for life. Everything comes together in the revival. And so I think to understand Mukti, to understand the revival is one of the same thing. And the other thing is that out of the revival, though it's been separated, comes not for her what some Pentecostals were setting as a criterion for genuine revival. Did she speak in tongues? I've asked my friends who are listening in what it would mean for Ramabai to speak in tongues, by the way, a linguist, unparalleled in world history. What on earth, what would be God's gift to her? And the gift was this commission during the revival to translate the Bible into Marathi. This is everyday Marathi, by the way, not refined Brahmin Pune Marathi, but this comes out of the revival. And so the scriptures are there as this radical text, which recognizes every human being as intrinsically valuable and called by God to be partners in recreating the world towards the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. And this is not just equality, Anna. I think with the kingdom of God has taken us beyond that, where we find we're not into day and night and things like that, but we have something remarkable going. So Mukti, I'm trying to say that to understand Mukti, we need to get the context clear, not forget the Sharda Sadhans and Froebel, but the revival and the Bible as something that will be used by Bible women, by those who've been at Mukti, in order that their lives and their households might be transformed by the scriptures. That seems really important. There's one thing about Mukti for those of you who haven't been there, which is that the church at Mukti, called in an original plan temple, interestingly enough, it's fascinating with history. Once you start working on history, you find some surprises, that it was largely designed by Ramabai, and effectively, I mean, the nearest thing, she was the clerk of works. And so in the book, I describe how I asked an architect to walk with me round the church, made of local stone, dug from the rock which made the wells. The rock was taken out to make the wells at Mukti. And how the architect didn't know who designed it and so on. And I said, look, speak to me about it. And there was this remarkable conversation where the architect said to me, look, this wasn't built by human beings. This was built by angels. This building is quite extraordinary. But right in the middle, Anna, of Mukti, there is this place, church, also a place where people slept, school, multi-purpose, whatever. And it seems to be like something set in the context of the trees and the Gulmahal trees, whatever it is, there's a banyan tree and so on, and flowers, the flower garden, where children play. And if you're there, you often hear the voice of children playing like Zechariah in Jerusalem. And so I simply wanted to say that that's something that in my living in Mukti for the last 25 years, not all the time, but going again and again, that's one of the extraordinary places to bear in mind.
Dr. White, I did have a few more questions to ask. I was really interested in Ramabai's Bible translation project as well, but I think it's time now for us to open up the conversation for others as well to join. If they would like to join in and, ask questions.
Could we, as we invite them together, Anna, sorry to interrupt, but as we invite them together, can I thank you for the way in which you've assimilated so much from this vast tome, 800-page tome. And so when I said students don't read, clearly you don't fit that typology. So thank you. You studied it.
Thank you, Dr. White. I was really challenged by your book. Thank you for writing it.
I haven't read your book, so I was wondering whether you have also talked about Mahatma Phule, because he was one of our contemporary and who also kind of supported her as against when she was facing attacks from Tilak and all, because he wrote that book Slavery, and it was also perhaps published on the same in the 1870s or so. So have you been able to make that connection, or about the influence that Mahatma Phule had on Ramabai?
Yeah, Raj, thank you so much for that. The answer is yes, but also Savitribai, his wife, of course. So that we're talking about two very significant people, but the answer is not enough, I'm afraid. So it may sound strange, but the 800-page book is an abridged version. It was longer. And one of the things that Mira Kasombi said was, look, Keith, concentrate on the things that, only you can do because of your knowledge of the inside of Mukti and so on. But it's fascinating that since I talked with Anna last week, one of the things I've been doing is researching the Phules. I mean, just both of them, because they were in Pune. There was an overlap in the time. And so I came to admire him while I was working on the life of Ramabai. So it's yes, but not enough. So that's more work to be done, particularly what their daily contact was. So I found I couldn't establish whether she went to their home or whatever. I mean, I couldn't work that out. Pune is quite a small city. So that fascinated me. You may be able to help further, but that's a really important connection.
Over to Prakash. Yeah. Prakash, unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Prakash from Pune, and I'm staying very close to Mukti Mission. And I was really excited to listen to Mr. Keith White because of many reasons. I happen to be the grandson of Mukti Mission because my mother grew up in Mukti Mission. She always tells us as children that she was brought in a basket in 1932, and there was one missionary who picked her up and named her like Daya. Marathi name Daya means mercy. And there are many stories that we used to listen to her about Pandit Ramabai. So my joy is to share these things with you all is that Pandit Ramabai happens to be my grandmother. And I was invited, and it was my joy and privilege to minister to Mukti girls in 2016. Thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunity.
If I might just say, I've seen the question that Barnabas has asked as well, but if I might say then, Prakash, we are related. If I'm a brother of Mukti, then I can't quite work out what our relationship is exactly, but it's going to be something like a cousin, second removed, and that's a special thing. And of course, the theory of change that I meant, different theories of change. Some would say you need a revolution and an army. There are different versions of this, Napoleon, whatever it may be. And the biblical view is that you might have a stump that seems as if it's all over, but out of the stump comes a shoot. And the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of Ramabai, then the God of your grandmother. And so what I'm trying to say is that this is another way of change taking place through the testimony that's passed on through something living. I wonder whether, could I respond to Barnabas' question?
Please. Yeah.
Is that all right? This was about the Bible, Ramabai's Bible, which is, just so you know, Tracy and people there are something like, it's between 40 and 50 suggested research topics, PhD topics at the end of the book. So if you're an academic, then don't even read the first 700 pages. Go to that and you'll find not only topics for research, but also references and so on. And the Bible is one that is crying out for serious academic attention, her Bible. So the reasons she did it, that is the Bible in Marathi, which was done from the time of the revival to her dying day, was because she believed God had called her to do it. So that was the revival imperative for her. There was a Bible Society version in Marathi, which she had grown up with, and when I say grown up with, she'd adopted, and then that was being revised. And she became increasingly concerned about the quality of the new version and tried to see if there was a way of working with the Bible Society on this new version. But in the chapter, I describe how sadly, for whatever reasons, the Bible Society wasn't able to incorporate Ramabai into their work. And so she produced her own version from Hebrew and Greek. She learned Hebrew and Greek, by the way, in a period of 2 weeks. That's both languages in the county of Devon, that is southwest of London. But so that's it. Still to this day, the Bible Society hasn't, or translating institutions haven't actually caught up on the significance of Ramabai's Bible, her translation, because she also provided a method of translation for Bibles worldwide. And we're still waiting for the time when people will say, aha, God gave us a gift through Ramabai, one of the world's great scholars, of a way of translating the Bible into any language. So again, Anna, this is a working model. So her Bible, she never did things that were just closed off. In other words, I'll do a Bible, that's done. It was always, this is a working model. So if you want to translate the Bible into any language in South America or the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, then you will find Ramabai's lexicon provides the method. Still today, also, the Brahmins find it difficult to understand, that's the Brahmins in Pune, why she didn't use the best Marathi. Why did she use strange words? And as some of you know, as a scholar of the English language, which is where I come from, one of my heroes is William Tyndale. And in order to translate the Hebrew and Greek into English, he had to coin, interesting, koine is the same word as the Koine Greek. He had to coin new words like mercy seat, steadfast love, loving kindness, in order, because they didn't exist in English before. And what Ramabai did when she translated into Koine Marathi, Marathi for ordinary people, had to find new words. That's a problem for people who say there's a perfectly good word. Why didn't you use that? The answer is the perfectly good word would not actually have communicated to ordinary people what was in the original Hebrew or Greek. So Barnabas, thank you for asking that question.
So exciting to see you, Keith, on this Zoom
You,
call.
Atul,
And
okay.
over 65 plus people are watching and interacting. And this is an exciting time in celebrating Ramabai's contribution.
Yeah, amen.
And you just know that this week they ended the huge Ramabai torch moving from all the way from Mukti to Delhi. And they just concluded.
Amit has been telling us about that, Atul, and I was just, there he is, bless you. And I just wish I could have been just holding the torch for a moment. Anyway.
Sure, we'll catch up on that a little later. But just to, I'm very fascinated by your work, and I'm deeply touched by your scholarship and your objective approach to the whole issue of Ramabai. I think you are one of the few people who have done great justice to what Ramabai has done. And so I would encourage people to take time and read your book and even grasp what Ramabai has been. My just brief question to you, if you may want to answer that, is many perceived Ramabai as a revolutionary. Others looked at her as a reformer. In fact, some called her rebellious person. I wonder whether through your studies and her writing and reflection that you have gone through, to find out what was her own perception about herself. How did she perceive herself? Did she really consider herself as a revolutionary or a reformer way ahead of her time? Or she was just doing what she is supposed to be doing? What was her own perception about her own self? And, if you could throw some light on that.
Well, I'm not sure I can. Atul, I'm never sure I can throw some light, but I try to hear Ramabai's voice. So Anna, when we talked before last week, we talked about her identity, and Atul is getting very close to that. Just to say about the approach of the book, we started on the question of, my view of history and where this fits. And what I was saying to you, if you joined since we started, was that as a sociologist, I encourage my students to walk around any issue, trying to see it through 360 degrees. If any of you know the game of golf, you will know that a professional golfer, when the ball is on the green, will walk right round to see how it looks from all the different perspectives. And so this book is an attempt, not a successful attempt. And I say to my students, you'll never be able to do it. How could a man stand completely in a woman's shoes? And so on. You'll never be able to do it. But the attempt is something that I encourage you to do. And so this is my attempt at a working model of trying to walk 360 degrees around Ramabai, which means I have to see her through British eyes, through American eyes, through, whatever. And then what you discover is she returns the gaze. And so you're not the same because she's actually returning the gaze on you as well. So Atul, how she saw herself, her favorite book was The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Now that's a difficult book, but I think it helps us all to understand how she saw herself. I've had the privilege of working through all the books in Ramabai's library, including all her annotations. When I say all of them, I had a group of students who worked for a week going through every page to see where Ramabai had written notes. And I think it's there, Atul, that I find in her annotations, I find the Ramabai you're talking about. In other words, she's not doing this, she wasn't doing it for anyone. She didn't know I'd be reading her annotations, for example. And I think it's in a straight line with her father, which is my child, he said, as his dying, his benediction. You are my dearly beloved child. and you are to search for the one high God, search for truth. And I think she saw herself, Atul, as a seeker after truth, a seeker after truth. And when she discovered Jesus, of course, she discovered one who made that extraordinary claim, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so she began her journey with him. But I think the important thing about that is that it is not trying to find a box, trying to find a group where she can then be at home. Professor Max Muller said she wanted to belong. Every human being wants to belong. And in a very real sense, Ramabai never belonged anywhere except in Mukti with those who were sick or those who were deemed to be disabled. They were her closest sisters. That's where she belonged. So who was she? Revolution or whatever, these were categories that she was well aware of them, but she saw herself as like the river Arkansas or the river Ganges that would over time cut through mountain ranges. So over time, she would be part of the process. Call that what you will. Is that revolution or whatever? But they're her favorite pictures. It's not she ever saw herself as saying, right, I've read about a Napoleon or I've read about this revolution or that revolution, and I'm following in that train. She nor Swaraj, whatever it may be, all of that she understood, and she knew that the change she was seeking would over time be as dramatic as the river Arkansas or the river Ganges cutting through mountain ranges. But it's that sense of a humble seeker after truth, a humble seeker after, I think that's how she saw herself. And so this bit about her not wanting praise, Imitation of Christ, by the way, is about the hidden life. It's about the disciplined life. She genuinely didn't see why she deserved praise. I mean, just genuinely, because the seeker after truth is not impressed by anything that gets in the way of seeking after truth. I mean, that's why walking with her is such a challenge, because I found myself again and again stripped bare by what I find of her. Is asking myself, now, what do I value? And who am I? And so, by God's grace, Ramabai has helped me to see that along with her, we're children of the same Heavenly Father, who, by the grace of God, find in Jesus someone who joins us. This is an image I use, like the two on the Emmaus Road. He joins us, and the risen Lord walks with us. I don't know whether that helps to answer your question, but that
was helpful. Certainly, thank you. That was
if you
good.
seek after truth genuinely, then one word of truth outweighs a world of lies.
Sure.
I invite George Kora, who published this book in India. George, over to you for the 5 minutes we have before we close, and then I will ask Anna to close the entire meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Satish, and good to listen to you, Keith, once again. Yeah, I represent the publisher. The name of the publishing house is Primalog Publishing Media Private Limited. We started in 2009. A group of 3 started this company with the vision that we needed to provide publishing services at a professional level, to be able to work with authors and even mentor writers to develop original Indian content. So we've been, we do not have too many titles, but the ones we do are significant. And we are drawn to history in some way or the other in all the books that we publish. And history has been fascinating because it has a lot to teach us for the present. And Keith and one of my business partner were good friends, and that's how we connected in 2009. And ever since, we've been waiting to see the manuscript, and it finally saw the day of light. I mean, in this year, a few months ago. So we were very privileged to be able to work with Keith and bring this out as a book here in India. It's available on Amazon, amazon.in. It's priced at 1,200. It's hardbound, so it's a collector's book that you can buy for yourself and keep it as one of your precious collections. So that's why we went ahead with the fine binding, and we are thankful to Tracy for this platform. We could have this discussion so that more and more people come to know about this book. So do check out the book in Amazon and place your orders. Collect the book. This is a book that you can give out to friends, and also make sure you reserve a copy for yourself. So we are hoping that we would see more iterations of this book, probably a easy reading edition, but all that is still in process. So hopefully in good time, we would be able to develop a book based on this work of Keith, as a book that would be more readable and which will not leave out most of the story, but would capture the essence of the story, but make it more accessible and readable for the general readers and not just academics. But this, I think, is a significant work, because this has become a major source material on the life of Ramabai, because of the extent of the research and documentation. So this is one area where we publishing in India, we need to grow a lot more and learn from the West, because of the depth of research that they go into. So the good thing about this, the level of this research, is that it makes it authentic, because you're presenting the whole work with evidences, and that is irrefutable. So, and that is the need of good publishing, especially from the Christian community here in India. So thank you once again. And it's always a joy to partner with Tracy. We have worked together on several projects, and yeah, I would look forward to more partnerships like this. And Primalog is our tagline. Our tagline says, collaborate, culture, and create. So we collaborate with people, we nurture their writings, and we bring transformation to the culture around us. And that's what we stand for. So looking forward to more interactions. with Tracy, Keith, and many of you who have been, you can reach out to me directly or take the book, order the book at Primal Log.
And I should especially thank Anna Jacob for the short time that we gave her to read through the book and take this conversation forward. And Anna Jacob, we thank you so much. We realize you are also very busy in the midst of your own research, and your research is also going to be something that's going to speak volumes for people, for missionaries, for the churches in India, the role of 19th century missionaries and their contribution to government and society. And I think that is going to be another conversation that we will take up one day. But thanks once again. Over to you, Anna, for closing.
As we close, I'd like to once again thank Dr. Keith for the opportunity of this conversation and the gift of being able to read such a rich book on Pandita Ramabai.
Anna, could I say thank you?
Yes.
Is that okay? I've thanked you already and thanked Tracy. The world is round, so one of my colleagues at Spurgeon's College was Bruce Nichols, and so we find that, well, I never, here we are again. And so I think that's very special. And it was Paul Joshua Bhattaraj, who was the colleague of George Cora, who was being referred to. But to say that, I think something I hadn't said, but it's in the book. There is this question as to why Primalog would consider someone from the West when it doesn't really fit their criteria at all. And so I find not only am I an adopted brother of Mukti, but sort of adopted author of Primalog. So I've sort of squeezed in. And something really important is that my father lived in India before I was born. And he told me never to use the word civilization until I'd visited India. When I went to the United States, I said, Dad, I've been to the United States. He said, well, I hope you didn't use the word civilization there, did you? I said, no, I didn't, Dad. Burger King didn't strike me as the epitome of civilization. When I finally went to India, before I left, I said, for the first time in 1997, Dad, I'm going to look for civilization. Where will I find it? And he said, everywhere, son, everywhere. And that was one of the most precious things he ever said. So when I sat in the bazaar in Kedgan, when I sat on the ground and with the spices and then with the person, the knife sharpener, my father had said, look for civilization there. And in the great, great subcontinent of India, with the Indus civilization, that's what has drawn me. That's where I find I connect very deeply. So that's what I want to say. I want to say thank you for, as it were, for sharing India with me. And again, apologies that I can't speak to you individually as I would. This is so difficult because it goes against the grain. There are some of you I haven't greeted individually, and this would not be the way I would normally operate. Bless you. I hope there'll be another time. And if by the way, people want to do research, I'm suggesting, as I say, about 40 PhDs, then I am willing not to be a supervisor of all of them, but certainly to be involved in helping to steer things, helping to get things going. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Atul, could you pray and close this program? You're on mute, please.
I also wanted to say that we are in the process of getting this book translated into Marathi, because that's where the great contribution of Ramabai was opposed and received. We are also hoping that we will be able to get the Hindi translation done. So those of you who are interested in this project, please do connect with me at atulats@yahoo.com if you are interested. But thank you for this privilege of listening to Keith and interaction with him on various aspects. Let us pray. Lord of all wisdom and grace and mercy, we are grateful to you for the life and ministry and legacy of Pandita Ramabai. What a great life. what a great contribution, what a great legacy she has left behind. And we rejoice even after 100 years of her demise in what you have done in and through this humble person, brilliant and yet committed, so sharp and so willing to be led by you. And Lord, we just rejoice in what you have done in and through her. And we especially this evening rejoice together with Keith for the way that you led him to dig out all different aspects of our life and bring it to our knowledge. And we just thank you for his contribution too. And Lord, we just pray that this book would continue to go in many hands and people would be able to realize the real contribution of Ramabai and the person who has transformed her would be known to them. And so, Father, we just pray that this effort that Keith and Primolog have undertaken would bring more fruit for the kingdom. And at the same time, we remember Ramabai's legacy, not only here at Kedgaon, but all around the world, that Lord, many millions of children who are abused, who are neglected, and who need attention, Lord, would be given attention because of what Ramabai has done, because of what her Lord has given her burden about. They will be touched by millions of others who are followers of you. So, dear Father, we just thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for many reflections that we have had together. And we pray, Lord, that you would continue to bless these efforts and ministry for your own glory. To that end, we thank you for Tracy and Primolog and all other partners, and we ask for your blessing upon them too. Thank you, dear Lord, for giving us this opportunity to be together. Let our mind be enlightened and our hearts be encouraged. For we ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.